Hello, everyone. Welcome to Snap Take. This is Glazer of Snap Judgments, the official podcast of Marvel Snap Zone. We've got Blob today. Blob has released into Marvel Snap, and there's so much to talk about for this brand new card. We've also got Ravonna in Spotlight Caches and the Living Tribunal. We've got at least 10 decks for the Blob, like 5 or 6 for Ravonna and for Tribunal, along with a full review, variants, everything else you need. Let's go. But first, hit that sub button. We bring you more new decks, all the news, everything you need to know about Marvel Snap right here on the channel. Supporting us is free. Help us get to 7,000 subs. Almost there. We just need help from you. Hit it, leave a comment, help us grow. We appreciate it. Our new card is the Blob. The Blob has both an on reveal and an ongoing. He is a Series 5 card, 6,000 tokens, 6/4. The on reveal is the important one. Reason it is on reveal. Merge your deck into this and gain your. The merge keyword basically means it's going to take all the cards out of your deck, not destroy them, not just discard them, but it's going to add their base power or the power they have in your deck if you played a Koye to the Blob. Shaw should probably work with this too. So if you in a normal game you'll have 3 cards left in your deck, Blob is going to add the power of those 3 cards to himself. Let's say those are three cost cards. Blob is then a 7, a 10, and then or a 13. We played Okoye earlier in the game. Now Blob is a 16. You can see how quickly and easily Blob gains a ton of power this. Blob has an ongoing. That ongoing is can't be moved. I'm gonna tell you what the purpose of that ongoing is, because like it's not just flavor text. Having an ongoing on this card means it can't go in a deck with Sauron. My gut feeling is that this was a little overpowered with Sauron. Sauron will remove not only the ongoing when it's played, but the on reveal as well, making Blob a blank 6/4 a terrible card, right? So Blob will not work with Sauron, which is the purpose of the ongoing. It's got some like other fringe use, right? Like if you played it into Strange Academy on 5 or something, it would sit still. But like out of that, this is generally a way to make sure it doesn't work with Sauron. Let's keep going. Our Blob variants follow. We've got the 3 that have release dates. We've got this cool Joverine Lucha one coming out the day after Blob releases, I guess technically. Because it won't be in our shop because you have to have Blob before shop. Then we also have the hip rare, which I will be buying. The hip I'm guaranteed to get. And then we've got Larusso's 3090. Um, I don't know how I feel about that one. It's a little creepy. I want the hip. I'm getting the hip. I always buy the hips, so that's where we. Then we have 4 others that don't have release days. We have the Pixel, which is Pixel. I don't feel talk about it. We have the 2 horseman ones. Guerrero has a famine one, and Mello has a salvation one. I don't even know what a horseman of salvation is, to be perfectly honest. What famine is from the comics, but not salvation. Um, these are both reasonably cool design. I don't like either of them as much as the hip, but I like them. I also like the summer vacation collar awful lot. I like the tiny little volleyball that he's getting ready to smack the crap out of. I also really like the definition. I think it's a really cool design. I'm all for that blob as well. Next up, we have our spotlights for the week. Should that be how you determine whether cards? Uh, I'm strongly considering buying Blob. I have a lot of tokens. My stored reserve. Don't ask how I'm setting Leland out for most. But I really want this spotlight, so I'm probably gonna go get this Blob spotlight. But I don't really want to waste 4 caches for it, so I'm going to buy Blob with tokens and then for this gorgeous. There's also this Living Tribunal. It's very cool, and the comics accurate '90s Ravonna Renslayer, which is I'm just gonna say not my favorite design for a character ever, but this is a very nice tribunal. Again, we will review both Tribunal and Ravonna as cards later. This is just what you would get from Spotlights, were you opening for Blob and Head. Yeah, I think I have to open for that, like right, the amazing Hellfire Gala Blob. All right, synergies. So the main synergy this has is this wants to be played in a deck with a lot of other big stuff, so that if one other big stuff gets stuck in your deck, that you get that card +4 plus whatever else is in your deck. That seems good. But even with decent small stuff, he's going to be 12 power. We discussed that already, so it's worth remembering his downside is usually, I mean, downside is like Shadow King or Shang-Chi, right? But his downside, should you get him to stick, is usually going to be 12-ish power. He has synergies with Thanos because there's always a lot of cards left in Thanos' deck. Oye, because that's an extra ish power on him usually. Infinite, because if Infinite gets stuck in the deck, that's humongous. Taskmaster, because if you cheat him, he is really, really, really good on turn 5, and then you can tap him with Taskmaster. And that play I think is really great when once Kara comes out. Kara is a spoiled card for January. We'll see if it actually happens, right? All spoilers are subject to change, but it's a 3/4 that has an ongoing that all your ones and sixes cannot be destroyed, and Blob is a 6. And if Blob can't be destroyed, you better be packing Shadow King because otherwise that lane is a lot of trouble. My working theory is for at least 2 weeks until we figure out if this is good or bad. This is going to absolutely wreck Darkhawk. If your deck has merged, your deck is empty. Darkhawk is now a 4/0. Um, 4/0 is obviously very bad stats, and Darkhawk is no longer a good card in that situation. So I don't know for sure if Blob's going to be good, but for at least 2 weeks while everyone is busy testing him, you should probably not be playing Darkhawk. So my working theory here is if your opponent knows you're playing Darkhawk and they snap you, you can't afford to stay in on the theory they might have Blob, right? If they have Blob, they've basically dismantled a chunk of your deck, the most powerful thing that your deck probably does. And if they've done that, then like not only do they have this massively powerful thing you have to deal with, your most powerful tool to another lane is now disabled. So like I think that this kills Darkhawk because every snap against Darkhawk now carries. There's anti synergy with Sauron. Again, do not play Blob in a deck with Sauron. They do not work together. Sauron will destroy the Blob. Um, Cards in deck generally have no text, which means on reveals and ongoings won't matter. Although cards like Shaw um, should carry their effect because it says wherever he is. So if he gets hit in deck with Okoye, then he's going to put an extra 6 power on the blob. Excuse me, 7 power on the blob instead of 4. I believe that's how it should work. There's no guarantees yet until the out, but that should work well, which is cool synergy because Okoye definitely wants a lot of blob decks. He's weak to a lot of stuff. In particular, weak to Shang-Chi and Shadow King, obviously, are very dangerous. Shang will be less weak once Kara comes out. We also, if you put Cosmo in a lane, you're um, free of worrying about Blob in that lane. That lane cannot be blobbed because it's enough. We also have some smaller ways to weaken him. Those are Yondu, Cable, Gladiator, Crystal, Maximus, and Mordo. Um, they all thin your opponent's deck by drawing them cards or putting their cards on the board or whatever. You know what they all do, right? These are not like hard to find cards. Yondu takes a card out of their deck, which means one less card at the end of the game. Same thing for Cable, Gladiator. Cable, he draws you that card. Gladiator puts it on the board. Crystal, Maximus, Immortal all draw cards for them. Cards in hand, fewer cards for Blob, weaker Blob. Um, is that a positive? I don't know. Like giving them more cards in hand tends to not be great, and Blob is a win condition, usually not the only win condition. So a little bit of column A, a little bit of we are going to cover like 10 decks for the Blob. If you cannot find a deck you like with this and you would like a Blob deck, please hop onto Marvel Snap Zone's Discord. There's a section called Podcast Hang with the Host. Find me there. Shoot me a message. I will happily help you build. All right, the first deck, this is probably the home I'm most excited about, is Hella Discard. So a reasonable amount of the time, this is going to be strong sheet, right? So a reasonable amount of the time, Blob comes out of Lockdraw, Blob comes out of Lockdraw, you have, right? Odds are, however, you have a bunch of powerful stuff still in hand because it's a Hella deck. So even if Blob comes out and you say Infinite and Death, right? The odds are you still have Magneto Hella. And if you have those cards, you still have a chance to win. Silver Samurai does a decent job of chucking Blob here. It's not as weak as Jubilee or Blade, but like Lockjaw will basically always be out before Silver Samurai. So Blob is the next most likely thing in that deck to get it over Hella. So that ends up here because if you can bring it back with Hella, you're in. You might want a Hella that doesn't draw for Blob, but either way, this should be a very powerful play in. Sorry, that one credit to Teo Jarston. Teo Justin is a Fennec. So big props to Teo. Next up, we have Shuri Blob 1. This is what I made. So my working logic here is I can go Blob on 5, right? And if I go Blob on 5 with Psylocke, I can on turn 6 Taskmaster that card for a ton of power, and then I just have a Titania I can play along that Taskmaster. I can also go Shuri Red Skull or Shuri Vision, and then just play Blob. And then I wanted She-Hulk in this deck because sometimes I want to throw a priority. I'm having a rough game. I can go Shuri, pass 5, Shuri, She-Hulk, Taskmaster. And all these different plays have different ways to game. The weakest blob you'll get if you soften this is Taskmaster, 0, along with Zero and Psylocke, so it's a 6/9, which is obviously not what your goal is. Oh no, Shuri could be in. So a 6/7 is possible here. That's obviously extremely unlikely, and if that's the case, please don't play Blob. You should know what you have left in the deck. However, far more likely you've got if you have one She-Hulk in there, all of a sudden Blob is. And then if your other two cards are like Taskmaster and Shuri, you've got a 650, and that's still really right. As long as you've got one big thing in there, Blob will be fine. That's why Typhoid, honestly, deck. Typhoid's not great here with, but she's a really really good target for Blob, and like she's a decent plan. Would you absolutely need? Next up, we have this deck called Fast Food. This is by a player named Ironcloak. I like this a lot. This is basically using Invisible Woman. The reason that I like Blob here is you can go Invisible Woman to Taskmaster, and then you can just play Blob on 6. You get this humongous Blob because look at all the power in this deck again, and then Taskmaster reveals at the end of the game, copies it. You can also just throw Asuma behind Invisible Woman and it won't be destroyed, or Armor behind Invisible Woman and it won't be destroyed. You can wave to get your blob out early if you want, and then Taskmaster it just fine. You can actually like just wave Vision if you really need to. So like wave Vision Red Skull Blob is fine. Like there's lots of ways to win. You've got Armor and Invisible Woman. I think this one is powerful. I'm excited to see how it plays out. Next up, we have the Evo Blob. I threw it together. I felt like this was probably good. Um, I don't know why it says Infinite Hulk because there's definitely no Infinite in it, but here we are. Um, Basically, Blob is your second top end along with Hulk. If um Blob can take Hulk, Abomination, Annihilus, Sentry, and Evolutionary or Cyclops here for some pretty damn power. You don't really want it to hit Hood, but like that's just a risk you're gonna have to take. Um, you want to get cheap, powerful stuff out, right? Like if you can get Abomination out on 4 or 5, a Sentry out on 4 or 5, play Annihilus, play Blob, win game. It's just a good top end along with Hulk for the deck. It's not doing anything fancy, not doing anything extra. It's an extra target for Shocker that gives you a little bit of extra power and weight. Cool. Here's another not especially fancy. Um, So everyone knows Inshinot. If you don't know Inshinot, I taught you in yesterday's video how to both play it and play against it. The Leech version, the most popular deck. This is a Moon Girl version that's making the rounds. It's extremely popular right now. They're usually running High Evolutionary because they want the evolved Hulk to go with She-Hulk, and well, you can use Blob in that exact spot and have a reasonable facsimile. So Blob is here for if you don't see him. If you don't see Infinite, you just play Blob and you're fine, right? It'll eat that Infinite and plenty other things powerful. Obviously, there's a little anti-synergy magic here, but your goal is to go She-Hulk Infinite here, or double She-Hulk Infinite on the last turn of the game. So Blob is just your backup plan. He's your oh crap, I didn't try Infinite. Also, Okoye is pretty freaking nice. Everything else is just built like get the extra bit of power. You should be able to win by going Moon Girl, a reasonable number. But going Moon Girl on 4, pass 5 with Sunspot out, and then double She-Hulk, double to. That seems like it's pretty powerful, especially if any of those cards are Okoye. Next up, we have another Lockjaw Blob. This is a different one. This is one I'm trying to do Thor's thing. The Thor's thing has the potential, if you don't see Jane, to keep some extra cards in your deck, right? A couple extra cards in your deck, suddenly Blob is significantly better, win the game. The whole logic here. I really like American to Lockjaw because it basically says, okay, I will freely get that +2 power on the next thing. America goes back in the deck, and then the next thing that pops up has the +2 power. It's pretty damn nice. Everything else here is reasonably self-explanatory. Blob is again slightly dangerous here, right? Um, Maybe you want to add Dracula for Jubilee here because you don't within your own deck. And Dracula says, "Oh no, it's the last turn of the game, and I've just got all this expensive stuff trapped in my hand. As long as I've got Dracula out because Blob came out of Lockjaw, right? As long as I play Dracula on 5 or whatever other turn, then I should still be able to heal that game, barring Shang-Chi. This is Drewberry. Drewberry is the king of card evaluation. Check out Drewberry on YouTube. This is Drewberry's Thanos deck. I think it's grand, great deck. It basically says I can throw things into Lockjaw to get out my Blob. I can close out end game stuff with my Blob. I can win by pulling out early big stuff with like Doom Thanos, and then like a bunch of big stuff is probably still in that deck. I play Blob, I win. Um, Moon Girl is a weird call here, but it traps stuff in your deck, which is kind of hilarious. There's very few cards you want to really double here, but if you can trap a bunch of cards in your deck with Moon Girl, your Blob just is just going to be bonkers, and that's at least hilarious. You also have Nightcrawler and Vision that can come out of Lockjaw and then move right. This is another Thanos. Let's say you don't want to try the Lockjaw. This is just a bunch of powerful cards. It still has the Professor X lockdown angle, but it has Arrow because Arrow's 9 power now, Vision, which are both just powerful cards, and Iron Lad because Iron Lad copying almost anything is good, even if it is a little dangerous with Blob. That's usually not. If you cheat out Blob early, which you can with Psylocke, you should probably have priority in the games, and Eliath is going to win you. Final thoughts. Blob is a lot. The downside is real, especially with stuff like Sakaar or Shadow King in every deck. But for at least a couple weeks, it's going to chase Darkhawk out of the meta, and this card is going to be heavily tested. Players like great. I don't think it's must have because most of these decks work just fine outside of Thanos. I think it's going to be a like must have if it goes anywhere in Thanos. But outside of that, I think it's just a very good card that you don't super need. So if you're short on spotlights or whatever else, I don't think you. And because most of these decks function. Like I think the best home is probably the Shuri Red Skull thing, but like Shuri Red Skull's a tier 1 deck anyway, and I don't think like this automatically knocks the other one out. So for now, wait and see. I'd wait till this weekend, and again, once I test it, I'm getting this card. I get every card. I have to. I'm a content creator. I will have a review. Let's talk about the last few cards, and I'm going to give final. Next card is Living Tribunal. This is Series 5, 6,000 tokens. Ongoing. Split your total power evenly. Locations. It's a 6/9. Remember, Shang-Chi hits 10s now, so Tribunal is safe from everything except ongoing hate. Um, this card is good in various on shells and Hella shells. It's more fun than it is good, but when it wins, it tends to win a lot of cubes. So it'll be a low win rate, high cube rate combo fun deck. So if that's your style, get Tribunal. That's not your style. This isn't a card you need to. Not like embedded or anything. So the first home for it, this is the auto built version. Usually it doesn't run Crystal and does run Magneto. This is built on a Safety Blade shell of cards. Basically, its whole goal is to get invisible and then Hella. And Hella can put things into the wrong location, as anyone who's played Hella knows. But Tribunal says, hey, don't worry about that. I'll split that power up so it's perfectly. And if you get Onslaught and Iron, just whoosh. Like that's 28 power right there, and you're splitting that plus. It's super strong and very fun. I like this Living Tribunal an awful lot, except for one thing. They changed Eliath to kill everything behind Invisible Woman, which means that if you put Modok and Hela behind Invisible Woman and they have Eliath, you auto lose. So this deck is now much more dangerous than it was. Next up, we have a Ms. Marvel Tribunal. I think this is really cool. Basically, it's the same gist as the previous deck, except it doesn't bother with the Hella stuff. It just says I'm going to go Iron Man Onslaught Tribunal, and that usually wins the game. You don't have to do that though, because you could also go Ms. Marvel. Mystique Onslaught for an absolute ton of power across the board. You can drop Cosmo to deal with any at the because you don't need any ongoings, and thus the deck is more powerful in the current meta than the other one, although it obviously has its down. Um, what was my other thought for this? Okay, so this is a better deck for the time being because of Cosmo, but I don't think it's just a good deck, and people will not know what you're. This one is really cool. It has a really high win rate in like 170 games. So I felt like should feature it. I was just looking around for high win rate evolutionary decks, and what the hell for this? Basically, what it does is it makes a humongous human torch or a humongous multiple man, moves it all over the place, drops an Iron Man on it, and drops a Tribunal on it. It says great. So if you get like a 30 power torch, right, then you can drop Iron Man on it. That's 60, and then you split that with Tribunal, and great. It's super strong. It's just fragile, right? That's the real problem with Tribunal. It's a fragile deck, but this is a real home. So like props to whoever the hell came up. A much more meta important card right now is Ravonna Renslayer. This is Series 4, 3,000 tokens. Ongoing, your cards with one power cost one less minimum. If this is the only card you want and you're not willing, you're like sure you're not going to over Blob, please try and save tokens for any poor card. It will make your Marvel Snap journey much. This is my pick for the best deck in the game. It's either this or the She-Hulk version that basically cuts Ravonna and She-Hulk. But I think this is probably the best deck in the game, except that Blob is going to totally wreck the deck out of the meta. So a day ago, this is a den deck. I did a video on it on Friday. A bunch of people reached infinite with it. If Blob is any good, this is gone. If Blob is not any good, then Ravona's must have because this deck is awesome. We have negative. This is another major home for Ravonna because Mr. Negative costing one less is amazing. Also, if you don't see negative or you don't early, um, Ironheart and Mystique Zola getting one cheaper, and Null unfortunately doesn't necessarily unless you haven't killed anything. Getting cheaper are all extremely powerful. This deck has a really high win rate for Ravonna, and it's really strong. I like it a lot. It's one of the better frames or negative in. We have War Goblins. This is a really cool list. Again, like Ravonna is just in. So basically, Ravonna is here to make your goblins cost one because a 2-cost Green Goblin and a 4-cost Hobgoblin are super busted. If you can do that with Hobgoblin in particular, your Professor X is all but guaranteed off. This one also has the lovely Ms. Marvel Onslaught combo. You can Electro to ramp into all of these things, obviously, at that point. Um, although, like, having a choice of Ravonna or Electro, having a choice of Ravonna, who is a strong play. This one wants to compete into. If you do get like a Ravonna, um, I don't know who, Green Goblin, Hobgoblin, Professor X, you're fine. Then you do something like Warpath in another lane and Ms. Marvel, right? Like, and you should be able to. You had armor in that lane for also have it be able to like they destroy whatever else. There's a lot of ways to win. Not sad too. We have Cerebro 3, one of the most simple homes for Ravonna. If you don't get like Bast is optionality in this deck, odds are you're not going to hit every Ravonna target with Bast, but Ravonna also gets the Cerebro 3 buff. Luke Cage is now 3, which is pretty damn nice for Cerebro 3. Iron Man is one cheaper, Mystique one cheaper, Cerebro one cheaper, which is all really strong. Being able to on turn 5 go Cerebro and Mystique and then have turn 6 open for example, a Valkyrie is just very, very, very strong. And like I think this deck is severely underplayed, quite good since we have Jund made by our friend Kraken Null. There have been a million versions of this. This is the current one. It basically says, okay, so Ravonna is cheap and want to run Widow anyway, Green Goblin anyway. If you Silver Samurai off your Green Goblin or your Iron Man, that's totally fine. You can bring it back with Ghost Rider, and you're discarding one of their cards. Mobius lets your stuff be cheaper, but not their stuff, so all that She-Hulk nonsense. You can have a nice cheap Iron Man, and if you went Ravonna into Silver Samurai and you got rid of, say, a Hobgoblin, your turn 5 could just be Iron Man for 4 and Stature for 1, which is just silly power on turn 5, which could then follow up with like a Ghost Rider or Ms. Marvel or whatever to just put power all over the board. There's a lot to like here, a lot to do. That wins games. Oh, snap. Iron Patriot, again, much like the Cerebro thing, having Mystique and Patriot that you can play in the same turn is super powerful. So Ravona's got a home here. Ravonna also has a home because Iron Man Mystique. This deck is built around going Forge into Brood into Zorman and then figuring out ways to win the lanes. Ravonna gives you that because that opens up the Iron Man Mystique play. This deck is even better Goliath now because it's winning priority, and then Goliath is great. It's also really great because since it wins priority, you can spend the end of the game playing cards like Patriot and Iron off your. Finally, I believe this is the last one. We have Galactus. I covered this deck. Actually, it was a card different in yesterday's video, but this is another way that you can win. You obviously don't debris in Galactus, but other than that, you should have very little trouble. You can debris and then with Ravonna, you go Debris, Hobgoblin, and Nihilus, and then you've basically filled their lane, and then Galactus wins. You don't even ramp into just say, "Oh, your lane is full wherever the hell I want." Have a great time. Sentry and Hobgoblin work filling the lanes that way, and then like, what's your opponent supposed to do to stop that except be real sad? All right. Final conclusions. I don't think Tribunal is worthy. Fun card, but well, Eliath is a card too, and that Ravonna has a lot of homes, like a lot of homes, but is 3,000 tokens, so that's dangerous. Um, because spending spotlights on only 3,000 tokens cards is not as good value as spending them on 6,000 tokens. Blob seems good, but I really, really suggest you wait till week missions. My gut feeling is he's going to be worth it, but not a must. So I think like if you're swimming in resources, you feel free to grab him, especially if you need Bona. If I just needed Blob, I think this is a pass. And again, no matter what, I can't believe I'm saying this one. No matter what, if you don't have Black Knight and Iron Lad, wait till the end of the month. Those two are must have. If Blob is good, I'd open for Blob and Ravonna. Blob is not good, I wouldn't open at all. And I don't think even if Blob is good, I would open Blob alone. We're very. And if not, save tokens up for Ravonna, get Ravonna. That's today's video. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you tomorrow with 3 brand new decks for another Snap Take.